Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of Northstar Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Hey, welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. As always, I'm Craig Picken. Hey, today I am really excited to have John Holmes with me. John is the CEO of AAR Corporation. And as most of you know, AAR is the leader in third-party MRO services for commercial aircraft and DoD operators. Revenues are a little over $2 billion. They've got 7 sites in North America and additional operations in Asia and Europe. AAR is taking a strong lead in the next generation of workforce development, aircraft services development, and just helping the airlines and the OEMs take aviation to the new level. Next level, I should say. So welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
So we got connected. I read your article. I believe it was in Forbes magazine a couple months ago. And you're really taking a strong lead in workforce development, making sure the airlines and the aviation industry has the right skill sets for tomorrow. Talk about how you guys are taking a lead in that a little bit.
Well, thank you, and appreciate you taking the time to read the article. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this is something that it's been important to AAR for a very long time. We've been around for over 60 years, and we over the last 10 or 15 years have really come a long way in making a name for ourselves in the world of heavy maintenance. And we're the largest in the Americas and the third largest in the world for heavy maintenance as you look at the number of labor hours produced each year. And so workforce development and recruitment has always been important to us because, we're independent, right? We're not part of an airline or part of an OEM. So we really have to, we've got to make a name for ourselves in a different way out there. But, things kind of kicked into high gear a little over a year ago. And, we're also a seasonal business because during the summer, we're typically very quiet because the airlines, as you know, they've got all their aircraft operating and they're out there and they're busy. And then in the fall, they bring them back for maintenance. And that's when our hangars fill up. And so during the summer, we typically, our workforce decreases by a meaningful amount due to correspond with that lower volume. And then in the fall, we go back into the market and, hire hundreds of people across our 7 locations in North America. And what happened last year is when we went back into the market, the economy obviously is very strong, which is great. It's about the tightest labor market we've ever seen. And so when we went back into the market, we found it very, very challenging to find labor, qualified labor, for really the first time in our history. And so we took a serious look at this, and as we came to realize the macro trends are difficult. You've got a retiring workforce. You've got, at least where we are, the pay is different than you might see in an airline MRO or OEM. And so we had to figure out a way to get creative, to develop our own, I'll call it proprietary, pipeline of labor into our hangars. And so that's when we launched a number of the programs that you would have read out in the Forbes article. Our Eagle Career Pathway program has been very successful. We partnered with 5 schools so far, and actually 6 schools so far, and we have a few more in the pipeline that we're looking at, and that's been a really great success, and we're again really excited about the pipeline of people that we have there. But we've also launched a number of internal initiatives built around the company's values. We're really proud of the values that we have and the culture that we have, and the idea is use the career pathway to get people introduced to AAR very early on in their career, and then hook them in and keep them with all of the other great things we do once we've got them internal.
Where do you see the biggest challenge? I mean, obviously, A&P mechanics, a lot of a lot of skill sets need to be developed there, but along the same lines too, and a lot of new materials being introduced to the industry. When you think about
I mean, it's a long road. It can take a couple years to become an A&P mechanic, and we have a very high percentage of A&P mechanics in our workforce, higher than most of our competitors, because we're looking for the highest quality people to deliver highest quality process or results. And so, in terms of the challenge, I'd say number one, it's just finding the people in the markets that we operate in that meet our very high qualifications. And once we find them, getting them in the door and bringing them along, and ultimately helping them get their A&P license. A challenge is we can't compete dollar for dollar necessarily with the airlines and the OEMs, to be very blunt. Many of them are unionized. They might offer flight benefits. There's other things that they can offer that we can't, just because of our independent nature. Where we do compete, though, is just creating a great place to work. And whether it's tuition assistance, again, whether helping with your A&P license, flexible hours, creating just a very healthy and friendly work environment. Those are the areas where we compete. And, notwithstanding the pressures on the labor market, we're very excited about the fact that our retention historically, and even now in this very tight market, is actually quite good.
Like I said, I mentor some business students at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And, they are much smarter than I was when I was 21,
Wow.
22 years old. How are their tech skills are coming into play now? Are you guys equally as impressed with what they're bringing to the market and helping shape the way you as a company think down the road?
It's interesting. We've learned a lot about that over the last year plus, and that's because historically we would go and we would really look for experienced hires, and so you try to find somebody with 5 to 10 years of experience and bring them in, and that was the primary source of our recruiting. Because of the tight labor market, and because of these partnerships that we launched with the schools, we're now going a lot earlier. So we're working in high schools, we're working in colleges, and so we have a chance to assess the talent very early on. And I would agree with you. I think, by and large, we're really impressed. But we want to get people excited about careers in aviation. There's a lot of things that smart kids can do. And I think making people aware of the type of career that you can have, that these jobs they're going to be around for a very long time. I mean, there's a lot of disruption in the world, but the need for a mechanic, an actual person to work on aircraft, that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And we also, it's been fun to open, some of these kids' eyes to the amount of money you can make. I mean, these are careers that pay very well. And, again, you're working on aircraft, which is cool, and you do that in a good environment, which is cool. And, so far, we've got some really nice traction dipping down to the younger level. I was really proud of, just to mention this, I was really proud that we launched a program at the end of last year and went live in April here in Chicago. And we partnered with, at the time, Mayor Emanuel. We partnered with Mayor Emanuel and the city colleges here in Chicago. And it's the first time we had done anything like this. It's a little bit different than the other career pathways programs, because in this case, we were starting a school, and in those cases, we're partnering with existing schools. So what we did in Chicago is there was a city college on the south side of Chicago called Olive Harvey, and they were investing some money to develop a new transportation campus, but it was focused on ground transportation. We worked with the mayor to get an additional focus on aviation. And AAR, we went out and we found an instructor. We wrote the curriculum. We donated tooling and equipment, and actually got some aircraft donated for the kids to work on. And then ultimately we provide scholarships. And I was really happy that we kicked it off in April. We graduated our first class about 2 weeks ago. Almost all the kids that started in the class graduated, and we're in the process of trying to get as many of them on board as we can to AAR. And so that kind of organic effort, particularly in an area of Chicago that really needs help in this regard, is something that we're really proud of. And we would look to potentially duplicate that in other cities as well, in partnership with city colleges.
Yeah, that's got to be really exciting to a kid, high school kid. And that's something I've always, we've been talking about in Carolina for a long time is, hey, do you bring shop class back to high school and allow kids to get, a little bit dirty and learn
Yeah.
things, mechanical things. But yeah, that's going to be exciting to a kid in high school, sophomore, maybe a sophomore, junior, to say, hey, look, when you graduate, if you get these skills, you're immediately making 20, $25 an hour.
Exactly.
And the path from there is blue skies ahead.
That's right. That's right. And those jobs will be around a long time. And you talk about kids. It's like I think about my 6-year-old who's in kindergarten, and he's in wood shop and he's playing with 3D printers and they're doing all this stuff. And that tactile work is very, very gratifying.
Yeah, no doubt. So, no, it's exciting stuff, and it's the one thing that every conference I go to, everybody's talking about the workforce, labor shortage, and
again, we view this, and I think you touched on it at the beginning. We view this, certainly it helps AAR, and as I mentioned, we want proprietary pipelines of talent wherever we can find them, and certainly that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, these partnerships with the schools that we're starting are not just about AAR, but they're about the whole aviation industry, and we're going to need several hundred thousand mechanics in the country to support the growing fleet and to deal with the upcoming wave of retirements over the next several years. And all of us in the industry need to be focused on this. And again, it's not just about going to be a pilot or working for an airline or working for a Collins Aerospace or a Boeing, et cetera. There's this whole network of providers out there and the independents, and we're the largest among them, that need access to this talent, and we're very pleased to be leading that charge.
Yeah, no, it's really good to see. I mean, it's just good to see somebody taking charge and leading leading the industry forward. So hey, look, so you guys are about a $2 billion plus revenue company. You're a leader.
You got it.
You're a leader in MRO. Just like we're talking about offline, your earnings are great. Growth is outstanding. Industry's changing. How do you see consolidation, new aircraft technology coming out? How's that affecting your business moving forward?
Yeah, I think all of those things are on our minds. I'd highlight a couple of elements as areas that are important to us as we think about the company. The fleet of aircraft that exists today. There's thousands and thousands of current generation 737s and A320s and 777s, et cetera, that are our bread and butter aircraft. And those aircraft are going to be flying in operation for a long time. And so from a kind of a base case scenario, we see, and we had an investor day in New York last week where we gave some statistics in this regard, but we see the fundamentals for that business being very strong for a very long time. It does get exciting when you think about the next generation of aircraft. Notwithstanding the current issues with the MAX, but the A320neo, certainly the 787, the A350, et cetera. And ultimately, as those aircraft mature and need maintenance, we're counting on being in a position to support them. The other area of the company that's exciting that we haven't talked about is the work that we're doing for the government. And we've won several $billion, and this was a big contributor to our earnings last year. We've won several $1 billion of contracts with the U.S. government as a prime contractor over the last couple of years, and that's new for AAR. We've been a participant in that market in various ways for a long time. We had some government manufacturing we still do with some. We manufacture pallets and shelters and containers that get sold to the government. But from a programmatic standpoint and a supply chain standpoint, we decided a few years ago that we were going to make the move from a subcontractor to a prime contractor. And we have been a participant on various programs as a subcontractor to some of the big primes, like a Northrop Grumman, for example. And as a result of those roles, we really learned how to do a lot of interesting things. And we were also learning a lot on the commercial side. And we felt that, approaching Washington or whether it's the DOD or the Department of State, et cetera, approaching them with a true commercial-based solution was a unique offering. And I say that because many of the companies that we compete against with now as a prime contractor, they grew up as defense contractors. So they've existed in the government, I'll call it cost-plus environment, where we came out of commercial. And now we're truly the only ones out there applying commercial best practices to government offerings. And, the government world is a lot different than the commercial world, and we're finding our way through that. But as I mentioned, we've been very successful in the last few years of winning some very significant prime contracts, and I'm excited about taking what we've learned on the commercial side and bringing those solutions to the government.
Well, you've got your efforts on the KC-10 program were extensive and still ongoing, I think, or no, not.
Well, that was a program we were sub to Northrop Grumman. Right. We played a critical role in that program. It was kind of one of those things where there were three different things that were being integrated, and in our view, we were performing the most complicated set of tasks. And so that gave us the confidence to go out and say, well, if we can do it in this environment, we can do another environment. So the big programs that we've signed up in the last couple of years we're a prime contractor to support the Navy C-40, which is a 737 derivative aircraft. We do heavy maintenance for that aircraft. We also do heavy maintenance on the Navy's fleet of P-8, which is another 737 derivative aircraft. We last year began work on a very large program for the Department of State. The Department of State actually has an entire air wing. Not a lot of people know that. And these are aircraft that operate in austere environments like Afghanistan and Iraq and move diplomats around. Well, they outsource the entire operation of that fleet. And we are the prime contractor on that program. And so we provide the pilots, we provide the maintenance, we operate the aircraft, of course. If they're going to go into a new location, we can actually build runways and infrastructure. We're really running this airline for the State Department. And, that's a very complicated skill set. And we have over 900 people on that program.
And that's through Airlift is that Airlift down in Melbourne?
It's out of our government programs business. Yeah, it originally was part of Airlift, but we've migrated that over the last year. But yeah. And then the other one that's exciting is that we also started last year as a prime contractor to the U.S. Air Force to maintain landing gear. We have a great landing gear shop in Miami with incredible capability, and the Air Force selected us to provide landing gear support for over 800 aircraft for the U.S. Air Force. So it's a big contract. It's a complicated contract. There's a lot of logistics involved, and it was the first of its kind for the Air Force, and we were selected to be the prime contractor on that. So, some real nice success recently.
So you got, obviously, I knew you're doing the P-8s up in India, I believe, right?
India, that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's a pretty neat airplane, and that fleet's growing.
It is. Yeah.
But component repair and the landing gear is equally as important as the heavy maintenance on the aircraft side of the house.
That's right. That's right.
What about as far as the new technologies and how when you think about like the 787, the composites involved in that, the A350s, et cetera, do you have to invest heavily to get new capabilities to support those aircraft, or do you find that it's somewhat organically growing?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's some tooling and training investment that will be required. That's for sure, and we ultimately will do that in cooperation with the OEMs. But yeah, certainly a composite aircraft is going to be maintained differently than current aircraft. We typically AAR we start to get active in a fleet when it's been out there for 10 years or more. When things are mature, the technology is available, the inventory is available. That's when we really start to push into fleets. We've moved that up, nicely over the last few years. For example, in our Power by the Hour programs, our component support programs on the commercial side, we support, for example, Hawaiian Airlines, a fleet of A320neos, which is obviously a new generation aircraft, and that's the first time we've supported an aircraft that's kind of brand new on the market in a complicated supply chain program. So we're proud of that and looking to do more on the component side. But going back to your question on maintaining them in the hangars, yeah, that work will be done differently once those aircraft are ready for maintenance.
There was another article I read recently, maybe Wall Street Journal or something, was talking about how the airlines got to start thinking long term and are taking a more proactive long term approach to their maintenance. Are you finding more appetite from them to lock in long-term service agreements?
Absolutely. That's a great question. A couple of thoughts there. First, I think it's important that we highlight that AAR is the largest independent provider for what for the things that we do. There's no other company in aviation that offers the heavy maintenance, that offers the parts support, that offers these integrated supply chain programs for both commercial and government customers. That's an independent. In other words, all the competitors that we have, there's very few people that compete in all of those areas at once, but any of them that do are either the OEMs, like an Airbus or a Boeing, or part of an airline like a Lufthansa or a Air France. And so our independence in that regard is very unique, and we believe in an asset. And, that I bring that up just to say that if we think about the airline customer base, it's very important to them, and we've got wonderful relationships and wonderful support with our customers. It's very important to them to have that independent solution available as an option. It keeps the market for these aftermarket services very healthy. So that's one. Two, with that in mind, we absolutely are seeing a longer-term view. And this actually came up at our Investor Day last week in New York. We talked about, historically, if I think back, a few years, and I'll use heavy maintenance as an example, it was very unusual to find a heavy maintenance contract that lasted more than 1 year. Typically, the airlines would move those aircraft around from provider to provider, and it was largely driven by the price that they could get. Now, price is still extremely important in that market, but the airlines are much more focused on longer-term agreements, 3 to 5 year agreements, to lock up the hangar slots so they know that they have a home for an aircraft. But the key word there is home, because it means a lot to the airline, and means a lot to us if we get a long-term agreement and our mechanics know the expectations of that airline. They know the expectation. They know the history of the aircraft. If you're working on a fleet for 3 to 5 years, chances are you're going to see the same aircraft more than once. So you've got the history of the work we performed on it, and you can build from there. And ultimately, that leads to better quality for the airline and better efficiency for us internally. And so, that kind of shopping the market every year, that mentality is, we see that dissipating, and we see a lot more, to your point, long-term thinking on the part of our customers.
Yeah, now going back to your DoD scenario too, you think about the Navy, and you've only got so much hangar space up in Indianapolis. Is the DoD as forward thinking on that as well? I mean, are they willing to lock in long term and compete for that hangar space, or is that a little bit of a different game?
Yeah, those contracts, most of our contracts with the DoD are long-term, 5 or 10 years or more. And yeah, they do think long-term. I think the other trend that's going on with the DoD is just more outsourcing in general, and whether they're choosing to have a third party like us perform heavy maintenance on the fleet, or buying used parts. I mean, that's something that we've been talking about for a long time. AAR is the largest supplier of used airframe and engine parts in the world. And, we like to say that if the United States Air Force bought like a United or bought like a Delta, there's billions and billions of dollars of savings there if they were to employ more used part contents in their engine and airframe builds. And we're seeing, signs that there's been some awards in the last few years that would indicate that there's more openness to that. But we do see a lot of opportunity for savings for the government, and certainly growth for us as a result of using more aftermarket parts content.
Do you? Has that been a struggle? Just, with laws, I believe there were laws on books that required them to buy new parts for some reason. How are you convincing them to make that shift?
Well, I think that it's a gradual shift, and there have been some, like I said, some awards and some actions that have been taken that would suggest that the government is more open to that aftermarket content. And I think the story kind of tells itself when you go and say, hey, if you used 30 or 40% aftermarket material in this engine build, you could save $1 million or $2 million per overhaul on an engine. And it's not like there's a lot of people conflate used parts and PMAs all the time. And PMA, of course, is the aftermarket part. So there's certainly room for that in the market too, but PMA is a different part. It's certainly form, fit, and function, equivalent of form, fit, and function as designated by the FAA to an OEM part. But in our case, we're not talking about PMAs. We're just talking about an OEM part that's just been recertified. And so these are relatively straightforward decisions for the customers, the government to make. It's just a matter of telling the story and pointing out that the savings are there, and also not only the savings, but that also the materials available. And that's really our core competency, is being able to find aftermarket material better than any of our competitors to actually supply it for the government so that they can realize the savings.
Sure. No, I got you. How is how is your relationships with the OEMs? Is it friendly? Is it frenemy? I mean, everybody. It's such a close industry. You're obviously working with the OEMs and getting some licenses to repair.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're competing against them on some used part markets. How do you manage that balance?
No, I think you hit it. You hit it very well. AAR is such an interesting company because even though we're $2 billion and there's a lot of other companies out there that are much bigger than us, we touch every player in the market, right? I mean, we box above our weight. And I think about the people that I'll speak to, and any senior people, whether it's with the government or commercial airlines or cargo carriers or manufacturers, you name it. If I think about all the people that I come in contact with every week, it's really amazing that we have so much reach across the industry given our size. But you pointed it out. I mean, we're playing lots of different angles at any one time. And so we can be a partner to an OEM. We can be competing with them on a program. By and large, the OEMs recognize the value that AAR places in the aviation aftermarket supply chain. And they realize that there are nooks and crannies of the aftermarket that they cannot reach themselves. And so there's a necessity for a company like AAR to exist to bring value to those corners and ultimately become an extension of the OEMs into the aftermarket. And so we've got some wonderful partnerships supporting our repair relationships. We've got some wonderful partnerships where we aggregate the spend from a particular airline because they want a nose-to-tail program, and we do nose-to-tail programs. And that spend ultimately finds its way back to the OEMs either through direct repair spend, or our buying piece part material from them to support work in our own shops. And then we also have a very large new parts distribution business. So we work with companies like Unison, a unit of GE, or Eaton, or Northrop Grumman, and others where we're a factory new parts distributor. And we work very hard to displace competitive product in the market and help them grow their market share.
Do you maintain the relationship such that, hey, look, are they coming to you to help them make their equipment and parts better?
Yeah, that's interesting. With some of the we haven't really touched on this, but because of what we do, whether we're doing heavy maintenance on 1,000 aircraft a year, or supporting over 1,000 aircraft on power by the hour, or managing tens of thousands of parts each month on repair for various customers, we collect a lot of data and we see a lot of what's going on in the aftermarket. And so that data, whether we share it directly or whether we use it to price things, is very good for an OEM. And I'll just give you an example. If we, through our aftermarket parts trading business, if we know that this many engines are going to come on the market as surplus and going to be torn down, or we know that there's a number of different aircraft that are going to be parted out, that supply of material on the market would be very interesting to an OEM because it may ultimately impact how much they decide to build themselves and how they allocate floor space. And so, there's again a lot of data that we can provide in that regard.
Yeah. So you guys, so obviously the digital thing, the digital market is really is starting to play, is starting to play a bigger and bigger role in
it is, and it is, and we're, I talked about this at our investor day last week, but we've got a number of different digital efforts that are designed to help sell the traditional businesses more effectively, but then also generate revenue on their own. And we launched our first software program here recently called Aviation that helps airlines manage their repair spend. And then we've got, this won't sound like a novel idea, but believe me, it's novel in our world. We've got an online parts store where you can fully transact and buy new parts through our parts store. That's one of the best options out there. And, last year, we saw, out of $2 billion, we were happy with this. But in 1 year, we did $25 million of revenue through our digital channels. And to see that kind of result after having only been at this really for 2 years, we're excited about that and excited where it can take us. But it's easy to get kind of go overboard on digital and, talk about blockchain and all these other things that are out there. And we're certainly looking at that very carefully, but we're focused on very practical solutions that can enhance the stickiness of our revenue and the ease of transactions with our customers.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. And I hear, you hear more and more about digital and data collection, and at some point, there's some great benefit to it, but at some point, where does it reach its maximum? Hey, the airlines are making money now. The industry
they are, yeah,
really
they are.
healthy. What do you see? Use your crystal ball. What makes you really happy? What scares the heck out of you moving forward? Is there anything you see that looks like really blue skies, and anything you see that, hey, look, we need to avoid?
Well, I've been at AAR for almost 18 years now, and I started at the company. Well, I accepted the job to come to the company the night of September 10th, 2001, and resigned my job the morning of 9/11. And to be at so then I joined AAR 2 weeks after that, and our revenues as a company basically went from $1 billion at the time down to about $600 million in less than 9 months.
Right.
And so, to go from an industry that was really, really struggling when I joined it to where we are now has been a hell of a journey. And the fundamentals, as you point out, are still extremely strong, both on the airline side. We had a few of our customers last week announce earnings, and we saw new records come out of United and Delta. The OEMs, United Technologies and Lockheed Martin, for example, they reported, I believe, just today, and they had great performance. So the performance out of the industry remains very strong. The backlog of aircraft to be delivered is at an all-time high, and I think it's a great time to be in aviation. And we are extremely well positioned in all of our markets to continue to grow, to outpace the growth. And, AAR, we grew at 17% last year, which was, certainly more than the market. And I feel good about our ability to do that in the years to come.
Do you see you guys adding some more capacity? You've got, 6, Rockford, Indy?
Yeah, we've got 7 facilities in North America. I don't see us adding more floor space in North America. I think we've got, you mentioned Indianapolis. Indianapolis alone is a 1.2 million square foot facility. We've got a lot of floor space in North America. Our constraint is not capacity in the sense of facilities. Our constraint, really going back to that labor issue, is labor. And Rockford, for example, which is a wonderful facility, we're working very hard to build a sustainable workforce in Rockford, which is just up the road from our headquarters here. And we'd like to, we want to make that a success for a long time. So I think inside the walls that we have are, at least in North America, we're comfortable with that footprint, and we want to grow inside that footprint. 1, 2, as we think about actual capacity expansion, I would see more of that happening overseas, particularly in Asia. We've got a joint venture in India, and we're working on building a facility over there with our partner. It's gone slower than we would have liked, but I think that's just the deal, and it's a long-term play. So whether we're a few months delayed now, I'm not as concerned. I'm more focused on the long term there. That's for heavy maintenance. But then I also see in and around Asia opportunity for component repair as well. I don't think it's required to continue to grow over there because components you can ship, and we're pretty good at logistics, so we can manage that. But I do think that over time, facilitizing Asia and bringing AAR's know-how inside of shops over there is something we'd like to do.
That's so you think it's India, Asia is where the growth comes from? Is Europe pretty pretty flat for now?
Yeah, we have a significant presence in Europe. If you look at our commercial business, actually 40% of our commercial revenues come from outside the U.S. So we're already a pretty diversified company. I think over time you could see that reverse, where the majority of the revenues are coming outside of the U.S. Europe in particular, we've been in Europe for 40 plus years. We've got a great facility in Amsterdam where we do component repair. We've got a great program in the UK. We have our repair management business, AAR in the UK. We have a great program in the UK with the UK MOD, where we support their fleet of AWAC aircraft. We've got sales offices that have really talented teams in Paris and London, and our footprint in Europe is very strong. It's a very competitive market. As I mentioned, two of our biggest commercial competitors, Air France and Lufthansa Technique, are headquartered there. So there's a lot of competition that's based there. But we compete very effectively, and as I mentioned, we've got a very strong footprint in Europe.
So last question: does the consolidation in the industry, do you see it coming more? Do you see it stabilizing? Do you see people starting to unwind a little bit of what they've done? Is it good, bad, indifferent for the industry? How do you see it all playing out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, we've gone through a lot of consolidation, and I think a certain amount of that is healthy. You've had several of these, very, very large mergers announced of late, and I think your point is really well taken. In as much as some of these mega mergers get done, there could be things that fall out of those mergers that are very interesting to us. And certainly the OEMs are focused on the next generation platforms and supporting those platforms. And to the extent that, they want to exit certain current generation or legacy platforms and use that floor space for the next big thing, I think that will create opportunities for us in terms of aftermarket support. So, again, we watch all that very closely. We've got great relationships with a number of the big OEMs, and I think ultimately that creates opportunities for us. But, again, I come back to the point that it's important to both the commercial and the government industry to have independent providers like AAR out there. And the customers want it, they need it, and it keeps the market in a very, very healthy position. And, that's what we're focused on every day.
Hey, John, that's awesome. Hey, congratulations. I just, like I said, I saw saw your earnings, the information you put out to your investors. Congratulations on all the success you've had this year.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we're focused on doing that again.
Yeah, no, hey, look, AAR is your stock ticker. Keep a close eye on it. And it's all great. It's a great story. Thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for taking the time, and we very much appreciate the interest.